In June 2025, Pakistan's Sindh region was hit by a brutal 52-degree heat wave. Hospitals shut down and the streets were filled with people, collapsing from the heat. However, there was one city where electricity, water and air conditioning all continued to run smoothly. No one could explain why this one place didn't break down like everywhere else. What on earth happened there? But before we dive in, please hit that like button, just one quick tap. Your support means the world to us. Now here's the incredible story. I'm Jared McCain. I've been working for 22 years as the head of crisis response for the Asia region at the World Bank. I've analyzed climate disasters across Asia, from hurricanes to droughts to heat waves. So when the report from Pakistan in June 2025 arrived, I just sat there stunned. The details were almost unbelievable. Sindh was facing a scorching 52-degree heat wave. It was a report saying that out of all the cities affected, only one had all its infrastructure working perfectly. That city was Hyderabad. With a population of just over 1 million, this city had fully functioning electricity, air conditioning, and water supply systems. Moreover, their power usage increased, but their electricity bills decreased by 30%. I immediately assumed it was a data error. No, it had to be. I'd never seen anything like that in my entire career. However, the same report came from the UN Disaster Management Office, the Red Cross, and even the US Weather Service. When I checked the satellite heat maps myself, it got even stranger. While all of Pakistan was glowing, red Hyderabad was the only spot shown in blue. That's when I started wondering what's going on here. At the bottom of the report, there was a single line. According to local officials, it was thanks to a cooling system installed the previous year, handled by a Korean company. Honestly, I scoffed at that moment. I didn't have much faith in Korean technology at the time. I hadn't seen anything like it. To me, it looked like just typical Chinese tech. It wasn't from the US, Germany, or Switzerland, just Korea, so it was probably an exaggerated report or some makeshift fix. However, the Brussels headquarters ordered me to investigate it. On the ground right away. McCain, go there yourself and verify it. If it's true, we need to change the whole approach to climate response. I muttered to myself while packing my bag, thinking, here I go again, off to verify another overblown report. But that city completely shattered everything I thought I knew about the system. I couldn't believe it without seeing it for myself. 2 days later, I landed at Karachi Airport. The moment I stepped off the plane, the heat hit me like a wall. It was 52 degrees and the scorching wind burned my throat. Heat waves rose off the asphalt of the airport. Parking lot and even the taxi drivers were hiding in the shade. On the way into the city, I saw something unbelievable. Cars were stopped in the middle of the road, and drivers were abandoning their vehicles and walking away. The engines had overheated and wouldn't start. This was the situation. When we reached downtown Karachi, things looked even worse. All the big malls were shut, and it was hard to spot a single person around. Some shops had notices saying they were closed due to the power outage. The hospital scene was even more heartbreaking. In front of Karachi General Hospital's emergency room, patients lay in the hallways, and the medical staff fanned themselves to stay cool. There was no air conditioning, not even basic electricity. One doctor said, "We're seeing over 200 heat stroke cases a day. There's nothing we can do." You could see the despair all over his face. The situation was just as bad when we moved on to Lahore. A city of 10 million people was utterly shut down. The blackout had already lasted 2 days and the water supply was also not working. People had taken shelter in basements or mosques, but even those places were no longer safe havens. On the streets, you could see people collapsing from exhaustion, and even the ambulances weren't running correctly. I couldn't do anything. Government officials continued to hold daily emergency meetings, claiming it was a crisis, but no tangible solutions emerged. That's when I got on a bus to Hyderabad. The driver said, "That city is weird. They say they've got electricity and running water." At first, I thought the locals were exaggerating, but then something crazy happened. The moment we crossed the border into Hyderabad, the temperature began to drop rapidly. From 52 degrees to 47, then down to 40, then 35. The bus driver looked surprised and said, "It's always like this. Once you cross this line, it suddenly gets cooler." I checked the temperature several times. It was the same sky and the same land, but the temperature was different. That's when I realized this wasn't any climate pattern I was familiar with. There was a system in place that I'd never seen before. The moment I stepped into Hyderabad, it felt like I'd entered a whole new world. People were strolling around the streets totally relaxed. At the cafe terraces citizens were, we were chatting and sipping iced coffee. It felt about 25 degrees Celsius. Even though it's just a few kilometers away from Pakistan, The environment was different. While walking around the city, I noticed some truly remarkable things. On every rooftop, silver box-like devices were installed, with small solar panels positioned right next to them. They looked way more advanced and quieter than regular air conditioners. Along the streets, there were tiny vents, and you could feel cool air coming out of them. The whole city felt like a living, breathing, cool breeze. I asked a shop owner in front of his store, "What's that equipment up there?" He said, "Oh, that? It's a new cooling system they installed last year. It's super effective and saves a lot on electricity bills." I asked, "Do you know which company made it?" After a moment, he replied, "It's a foreign company. I think it was Samsung or something like that." Samsung. I never thought it was the actual Samsung. The Samsung from Korea, that's Samsung. But yeah, a Korean company in a small Pakistani town. I'd never heard of a facility like this being installed before. So I headed over to City Hall. In the lobby, I was met by Section Chief Hassanari. He was in his early 50s, and after checking my ID, he gave me a cautious look. "You're from the World Bank? Is there something special going on here?" I politely explained that I was here to investigate why this place was functioning normally, while the surrounding areas weren't. Then Chief Ali shrugged and said, "Guess we just got lucky." "It's nothing special." Lucky, I thought. Telling a climate expert with 22 years of experience that it was just luck? I asked if I could get some info about the cooling system they installed last year. Ali's face suddenly went stiff. "That system's no longer under our jurisdiction. It's hard to share details with outsiders." "No longer under your jurisdiction?" I couldn't understand why a cooling facility would be outside their authority. That name kept echoing in my mind that night back at the hotel. They were hiding something. Something was going on. One name was deeply tied to the city's abnormalities. That morning, a strange shadow was already waiting in the City Hall lobby. The next morning, the same stranger was there first again. She looked to be in her late 30s, with calm but determined eyes. Her name was Shayna Noor. She's a gastroenterologist at Hydera General Hospital. She checked my ID and smiled quietly. "I heard you spoke with Manager Ali yesterday. I'm here to help." She was the complete opposite of the cold vibe from the day before. On the way to the hospital, Shayna calmly explained that in 2023, the Pakistani government launched a climate response pilot project, and Hyderabad was chosen as the test city. Many companies, including Samsung, competed, but Samsung's proposal went beyond just technology. It had a more profound philosophy. When we got to the hospital, I was momentarily speechless. The babies in the neonatal ICU were quietly sleeping, and the medical equipment and air conditioning systems were running perfectly.
The temperature was perfectly steady at 24 degrees. But then, a sharp voice cut through the mood. "So, you're sharing internal info with foreigners again, huh?" It was Jawad Hakim, a man in his mid-50s, the technical director at Pakistan's Energy Authority. His gaze was cold and stiff. When I explained I was there on the World Bank's request, he shook his head. "This isn't success, it's a setback. We could do this with our tech, but you insisted on bringing in a foreign company." His tone was sharp, clearly showing his distrust of Samsung's system. Shayna tried to respond carefully, but Hakim was firm. "Last year, American tech brokers tried to steal this system. They managed to sneak equipment into the CCTV system, but fortunately, it was stopped beforehand. Samsung designed the security tight, but that means they didn't trust us." The air grew heavy in that moment. In the silence, I could feel it. This system wasn't just an air conditioner. Beyond the technology, there was a whole philosophy. There were complicated feelings tied up with trust and authority. Shayna led me deep into the hospital's neonatal intensive care unit. I stopped breathing at the sight through the clear glass. Over 100 incubators were running perfectly, each one carefully controlling temperature and humidity. Tiny lives were quietly breathing inside. This time last year, more than half of them were off. Shayna's voice was low and shaky. Power outages continued to occur, and they were unable to keep the babies safe. Then a nurse came over and whispered to Shayna, "The baby in bed number 3's temperature is stable." A tiny little life, no bigger than a palm, was peacefully sleeping. A little later, we met a young mother lying on one side of the room. She looked barely over 20. Her name was Fatima. She wiped away tears and said, "I lost my first child last year. The hospital's power kept going out back then." Shayna gently took her hand. "It's okay now. The system will protect you." Fatima nodded. She told me, please make sure to thank those Korean engineers for me. At that moment, a strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't just about technology, they were talking about opportunity. Shayna took me up to the rooftop. There, dozens of solar panels and silver cooling units were quietly running. This is the Samsung Smart Ecosystem, she said, pulling out a tablet to show me real-time data. Outside temperature 48°C, inside the hospital 24°C, energy efficiency 94%. I couldn't believe my eyes. I've been to dozens of countries, but I'd never seen numbers like this before. She explained that it was a solar-powered system linked with AI optimization algorithms. It stores energy during the day and uses that stored energy to keep things cool at night. Samsung covered all installation costs, offered 10 years of free maintenance, and even included training for technology transfer as part of the deal. They cared more about proving the system than making a profit. Shayna said, they just wanted to make sure this technology could save lives. I was speechless. This wasn't business, it was about the climate. It was an experiment during a time of disaster. There was a commotion on the first floor at the time. When we rushed down, Hakim and some government officials were arguing in the lobby. This system can't operate without government approval, Hakim said firmly, his tone sharp. But at that moment, Shayna quietly told me, we didn't just receive technology. We got a chance to survive. Those words settled deep in my heart, stronger than any technical report. That night, I was barely able to catch some sleep at the hotel when Shayna's phone rang. Mr. McCain, please come to the hospital right now. There's a problem with the system. When I got to the hospital, the control room was tense. Red warning lights were flashing on dozens of screens. There's a hacking attempt coming from outside, Shayna explained, catching her breath. IP tracking shows the signal is coming from a US server. At that moment, the name Hakim had mentioned popped into my head. Theo Hunter, the ones who had failed before. They were trying again. Suddenly, a temperature alarm went off in the East Wing. The numbers shot up fast: 28, 29 degrees. The cooling system was shutting down. The tech team rushed in all at once, but the attack was constantly changing the system's behavior every 3 seconds. I felt a chill run down my spine. If this trend continues, hundreds of patients could be at risk. Then one thought flashed through my mind: this isn't just an attack. They're trying to destroy the system's trust in itself. And then something unbelievable happened. A strange message popped up on the screen: automatic defense system activated. The dual random pattern blocking algorithm is running. External access isolated. What's that? Shayna whispered, holding her breath. It's a feature we didn't even know about, the tech guy said, surprised. A few minutes later, the hacking was blocked entirely, and the temperature in the East Wing stabilized back to 24 degrees. Shayna immediately co-headed the co-headquarters in Seoul. That's when the automatic defense system kicked in. Did you detect it in real time from Seoul? After the headquarters said, headquarters already knew. They were monitoring everything live and even sent remote security patches at the same time. I found it hard to believe. The fact that thousands of kilometers away in Korea, they were watching over every detail of this hospital in real time kept me up that night. This wasn't just a tech battle. In this era of climate disaster, a war had begun over who would control the future. And Korea had held its ground in the first fight of that war. But I had a gut feeling the next threat would be sneakier and more political. The next morning, it happened. The Pakistani government ordered an urgent inspection of the Samsung system. Standing before reporters, Hakim said, this hacking incident revealed security vulnerabilities. We need a full review from a national security perspective. Soon, government tech teams swarmed the hospital, dismantling the cooling equipment one by one and moving it into temporary storage. The room temperature was rising rapidly. Shayna whispered to me, the emergency surgery room keeps getting hotter. At this rate, we'll have to stop the operation. I couldn't take it. Lives were at risk right now. But the tech lead was cold about it. This place is under government control. Outsiders, please step back. Then, the whole hospital went dark, a blackout. The backup generator kicked in, but it wasn't enough to power the cooling system. The temperature read 30 degrees, 32, and then 35. The surgery room's temperature was rising quickly, and the medical staff were debating whether to halt the surgery. I turned to Hakim again. Can you handle this situation your way? He said nothing, just bit his lip. Then, a miracle happened. Despite the blackout, some systems were able to come back online. The power stored in the solar batteries began to run with an emergency recovery algorithm. The surgery room temperature dropped fast, and the medical equipment slowly came back to life. The surgery was safely resumed. Hakim watched the scene silently. For the first time, a complex emotion flickered across his face. I spoke quietly, it doesn't matter who made it. When it comes to life, everyone is equal. That afternoon, the government announced the immediate restart of the Samsung system. Hakim left just one sentence in front of the reporters: the safety of citizens is the last line of defense. That night, I looked out the hotel window. The lights of Hyderabad were quietly alive and breathing. And I felt that each light was connected to someone's life and Korean technology. No matter the political pressure, the truth survives. And Samsung still stood firm on that truth. 2 weeks later, I witnessed an unbelievable scene. At the UN Emergency Climate Change Response Meeting, the Pakistani representative made an official announcement: the Hyderabad Samsung Smart Ecosystem should be recognized as humanity's shared technology. The conference hall fell silent. The UN Secretary General spoke directly on the spot. Technology will become the new standard for tackling the climate crisis. Even more amazing news continued to come in. 5 countries, including Qatar and Egypt, signed preliminary agreements with Samsung, and other nations have also started talks. That's when I realized that a small experiment that began in Hyderabad was spreading worldwide. At the Brussels headquarters, I was given a new mission: assess the global applicability of McCain Samsung technology. While preparing that report, I uncovered some incredible facts. Every system installed after Hyderabad showed the same results: over 90% energy efficiency, an 85% drop in medical emergencies, and 98% citizen satisfaction. But the most impressive news came from a report out of Egypt. Thanks to the Samsung system, the 2,000-year-old Luxor temple is being preserved. The same was true for Mohenjo-Daro. The 4,500-year-old Indus Valley civilization site was being protected from extreme heat. In a letter from Dr. Rashid, he wrote, "There was something important. Samsung didn't just save people. They saved human civilization itself." That's when I truly understood what it meant. This technology wasn't just about making money. It was about protecting life and civilization. After that, UNESCO announced that it had officially begun reviewing this technology for potential listing as a model of cultural heritage for humanity. It was the first time technology was considered for cultural heritage status. Hearing that announcement, I remembered my last day in Hyderabad. The one thing Shayna said to me: "We didn't receive technology. We received the future." Looking back now, that was exactly right. What Korea gave the world wasn't just simple cooling technology. The hope that life can be preserved even during extreme heat. It was the belief that people can live safely. It was the confidence that civilization could continue. I revisited Pakistan. The moment I stepped off the plane at Hyderabad Airport, a huge banner caught my eye. "Thank you, South Korea, for protecting our future." The taxi driver asked, "Are you Korean?" I said, "Yes, thank you so much. My grandson grew up healthy again this summer." Fatima, whom I met at the hospital, was now holding a healthy baby. Hope's name is Hope. I asked, "What does hope mean in Korean?" They said, "It means So Mang, hope wish." So, this baby's nickname will be So Mang. That's when I finally realized what Korea left behind in Pakistan wasn't just a system, but Hopeam, the name Hope, the name So Mang. On the flight back, I wrote the last line of my report: the nationality of technology doesn't matter. But the philosophy of the country that created that technology does. And that country with that philosophy is South Korea. Even right now, somewhere in the world, lives are being saved thanks to Korean technology. Every breath they take is a miracle South Korea has given to the world. Next time, I'll share more amazing stories about Korea. Wherever you're watching this video from, and about today's story, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching the entire video. This has been me Yeon from Director Mall. Wishing your family lots of warmth and happiness today. I'll be back tomorrow with an even better story. Thanks again.